The children of Israel traveled to Egypt and escaped a horrible famine, all because of the deft leadership and insight of Joseph. And in saving the children of Israel, Joseph also saved the people of Egypt. So what we have is initially a beneficial, helpful relationship between the children of Israel and the people of Egypt. They were both rescued through death through this relationship. But now, a king comes up who never knew Joseph. He's forgotten, apparently, how the children of Israel, how they brought life and prosperity to the kingdom of Egypt, not Israel yet. And this failure in memory results in alienation and fear. The king of Egypt sees this alien people in his land as something that needs to be tightly controlled. If this people continue to grow in numbers, he's thinking they will certainly become a military liability. They will turn themselves over to the enemy that's opposing, and all of a sudden the force will be twice as big against them. Something has to be done. Harsh measures are called for. So to weaken them, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, sets them to cruel forced labor, hoping to break their spirits. But this brutal tactic fails, and the children of Israel continue to grow more and more numerous. The Pharaoh tries a new, even more diabolical plot. He tells the midwives to kill all the male children that are born to the Hebrews. Now, it's hard to say. The words and the names are not clear. It's hard to know whether these midwives are Egyptian or Israelite. It could go either way. And as it happens, it does not greatly matter, because this story transcends national and religious identity anyways, as we will see. What is important, however, whether these midwives are Egyptian or Israelites, is that they do not obey the king. Pharaoh, apparently caught now in this genocidal raids, ups the ante even more and now commands everybody, not just the midwives, but everybody, every person, every Egyptian in the land, to kill any male infant Israelite child they see. So things have gotten pretty dark. And it's at this moment of darkness, at the height of Egypt's oppression over the people of Israel, that a baby child is born. And this child has not done anything good or anything evil, yet the world is already set against it in a deathly rage. The baby's mother, we all know this story, of course, but the baby's mother hides this newborn child for 3 months, as long as she can, but there comes a point when she cannot hide the child any longer. And so she takes the gamble of a lifetime, not knowing where it's going to go, wagering everything, putting the small baby in a small little woven basket, putting it on the River Nile, and letting it sail off. The baby's older sister follows the baby down the river to see what will happen to this baby. The mother doesn't, maybe because it's just too much to bear. Too much grief, too much sorrow, too much heartbreak. Meanwhile, if we were TV, we would switch camera views. Down the river, the daughter of none other than Pharaoh himself is at the river bathing. And Pharaoh's daughter has some servants, slaves that are attending her, that are serving her while she bathes at the River Nile. This basket starts floating down. She sees it, and she goes and retrieves it. Seeing the child, she immediately recognizes it as a Hebrew boy. Now, of course, we all remember that her father is none other than the Pharaoh, and she is a good girl, and so, and her father has ordered all people, anyone in Egypt who sees a Hebrew boy, to kill that boy. So she's a good girl, and immediately does as her father tells her and kills the baby. No, that's not what happened? Of course, that's not what happened. That would be a screeching halt to the whole biblical narrative if that's what happened. Pretty much the whole Bible would just be unwritten in a moment. No, of course, that's not what happened. But sometimes I think we fail to see the courage and audacity of this young woman that she offered in the service of life. We are told, Paul later, probably next week, I don't know when the reading occurs in Romans 13 and elsewhere in the New Testament, we are told that it's good to obey the powers that be. It's good to obey authorities, governments, structures, people in leadership, governments and rulers. And such obedience has its place, I'm sure, but this story provides an important and necessary counter-narrative to that. We see in this story that people who are the heroes of the story are being actively disobedient to the power structures because those power structures are in the service of death. Now, obedience might be good, but there are contexts and situations where disobedience is better. If any government or authority turns to death dealing, it is not only our right, but our responsibility to resist, to disobey. So the midwives and the daughter of Pharaoh resist. They will not let themselves become agents of death in the name of obedience. So the daughter of Pharaoh and her attendants take the baby out of the water and name the baby Moses. Moses' sister, we later find out is named Miriam, who's following, sees this happen, and she quickly goes up and says, I have the perfect wet nurse for this baby. And the Pharaoh's daughter accepts this, and so the baby, Moses, and his mother are reunited. Presumably the Pharaoh's daughter doesn't know, presumably. Well, the story doesn't really say. Now, we all know Moses will go on to become this world-changing leader. He will lead the people to freedom. He will give them teachings that will lead to more fair and more just society. But before he does any of that, he has to survive childhood. If he doesn't survive childhood, he's not going to get to do any of those things. And in childhood, one is utterly vulnerable, and sometimes utterly vulnerable in a cruel and dangerous world, a world that turns to terror and genocide. We live in a beautiful world, but this world can turn ugly and brutal when fear and ignorance join hands. So how does Moses survive? Let's just look at the story again. How does Moses survive? He survives because a cadre of women banded together to resist an evil patriarchal system of death. Look at the story. That's exactly what happened. A bunch of women got together and resisted this male-run government, patriarchal, that was bent on death. There were the midwives, whether they were Hebrews or Egyptians. They said no to this order of death. Then, of course, there's Pharaoh's daughter, her servants, Moses' sister, Moses' mother. All of these women came together in working together, and they resisted this patriarchal system of death. They all joined hand to save the life of one small baby. Now, some of these women came from places of wealth and power, obviously Pharaoh's daughter. Some came from places on the margins, the servants of Pharaoh's daughter, Miriam, Moses' mother. And this is where it gets really interesting. Some of these women followed the God of Abraham, and some followed the gods and religions of Egypt. Some spoke Hebrew. Some spoke Egyptian. Yet despite all these differences, cultural, linguistic, religious, all these differences, they came together in the name of life and justice, and they saved this one little helpless baby boy. The small cadre of women resisted the empire. They resisted Pharaoh, and even Pharaoh's daughter, close as you can get to the power. So you have like this whole collection of social strata who are joining this small little revolution. And they all risk remember, this is the order of Pharaoh. You don't disobey Pharaoh and just get away with it. It wasn't that kind of world. So they all took their lives in their hands. They all took great personal risk to do what they did. If they got caught, it probably would have meant death. And they did all this to save one baby. There's so many babies that they didn't save in this time of genocidal rave that we might be tempted to think of these women as failures despite the fact of this great success. This is a saying that's written in both the Quran and the Talmud, and it's one of the great religious truths, I think, on the planet. It says, and it's written in both these religions, their holy texts. The one who saves one person is as if they saved the whole human race. So we shouldn't think of these women as failures. They saved, as it were, the whole human race. This is a wonderful story. I love this story. It inspires us. Let us be a small cadre of women. Let us be the mothers, the sisters, the daughters who say no, who say this shall not stand. Let us be those who join hands with those of other ethnicities, other religions, other languages, and resist the pharaohs of our day and our time. Let us resist the pharaohs of our day and our time that are willing to sacrifice the poor of the earth so that they can have far more than they need. Let us resist the pharaohs who only see everyone else as threats and not as fellow human beings. Let us resist the pharaohs who think it's okay to just ignore the plight of single mothers, the unhoused, drug users, refugees, any human being who has been discounted, rejected, and set aside. Let us resist that, and let us be bold in our disobedience to that. And let us always resist in the name of our brother Jesus, who also resisted. Amen.